Doesn't that poem about stillness just invite us to slow down? Stillness is my beloved teacher is the first line. Stillness is my beloved teacher. The poem goes on to describe all the ways in which stillness companions us throughout our lives. And it's almost perfect for this time with so many doors closed and businesses and places shuttered and quiet. Some of our office spaces and workspaces growing dust. There are these pockets of stillness all around us. And with the coming winter, we might have winter. My child keeps on telling me it's going to be snowing on Wednesday. And I respond, that doesn't mean you get a school day, child. But with the coming winter, the nights are growing longer and longer, and the days are growing shorter and shorter. And I knew that, but I had to look up. Sunset today is going to be at 4:47. 4:47. I was absolutely surprised to hear that it's going to be that early. Before 5 o'clock, the sun is going to go down. So it only makes sense that our ancient forebears tracked and knew exactly when the solstice came, when the light begins to return and our days become longer. And the story of Hanukkah, one of the added layers of meaning to the Hanukkah story is the significance of adding a light on the menorah each night to mark the coming of the light anew. But more broadly, the story of Hanukkah is really a message for our time. And you may remember, for our Jewish canon, those who celebrate in our congregation, the story of Hanukkah. It's actually not in the Bible, it comes from the Talmud and historical events. So after the Syrian invasion in 128 CE or Common Era into Jerusalem, the temple was desecrated and Judaism was abolished. Shabbat and festivals were outlawed, and the Jewish people were offered two options: conversion or death. And a resistance rose up and drove out the Syrian invasion. And when the Maccabees, those who revolted against them, when the Maccabees went to reclaim the temple, the holiest of holies, they found enough oil to ignite their Ner Tamid, or the holy eternal light, for just one night. So a messenger was sent out, someone was sent out to bring back more oil, and it is said that it took 8 days for them to return. And yet, the eternal light continued to burn. Thus, the miracle of light. The rabbis and the Midrash around this story emphasize valor and courage against overwhelming odds, the refusal to submit to tyrannical demands and assimilation, and the fight for self-determination in this telling of the Hanukkah story. It's also a story of the growing light of hope, of families and communities coming together and together, again and again, despite the odds. Sounds familiar, yes? But at that time, just let's picture it for a moment. Our city, our house of worship, our people, our traditions have been squashed and repressed. There's fear and suffering all around us, and the people rise up and declare no more. And they fight against a force much larger than us, more powerful, pervasive, cruel, and merciless. And the people rise up and say no more. And the house of worship becomes a home again, a spiritual home. And the temple is ours again. This place of covenant, this place of belonging and tradition, generations of families. The Ner Tamid, the flame that is never to be extinguished. The Ner Tamid, the flame that is never to be extinguished, is relit. And this eternal flame, a symbol of God's presence in the world and the lives of the people. So picture it, a city in ruins, a people broken and yet victorious, and the Ner Tamid is reignited, a spark of hope. And yet it's only supposed to last one night. It may only burn for one night, but it endures. The thought that just came in my mind is this pandemic was only supposed to last 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. And yet we persist. That flame continued on, despite the odds, inviting awe and wonder. Picture it, the stillness all around this flame, as the people keep watch, waiting it for to flicker and flame out. And yet, the Ner Tamid persists. And yet, we persist. Adrian's correcting my pronunciation. Adrian, will you unmute and correct it, please? Tamid, excuse me, I knew that. Tamid. Thank you, beloved. For our Jewish kin, and for those in our congregation who celebrate Hanukkah, each night a candle is added to the Hanukkah, as Aiden shared with us this morning with their great wisdom story. And did you notice Cyrus and Dominic and Rolf's as well with the 3 candles? And the Talmud emphasizes the obligation in this time to sit and notice, to sit still and notice. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt shares this: we light the candles in order to remember miracles and wonders, and their light is holy. So holy, in fact, that we're not supposed to use that light for ordinary things. Instead, our job is to just enjoy them, to look at them, to contemplate them and their small beauty, and to cultivate an upwelling of thanks and praise. In this way, Hanukkah invites us to a contemplative practice. Sit still and notice. Sit still and notice. Notice in wonder their small beauty. Stillness is our beloved teacher. Stillness and quiet. And there is so much quiet around us these days. The streets are quieter at times. The stores are quieter. Spaces are quieter. I also think about the quiet of many of our schools. My children's elementary school, they're in middle school now, but their elementary school is less than a mile from our home. And within a block during a busy school day, you can easily hear hundreds of children when they are all out on the playground. And Beale Elementary is sort of just right down the hill from UUCR where we are. And if the windows are open, and while we're all in the office, we can hear the bells ring at the start and the end of recess and the joyful cacophony in between. And with the 2 nurseries here on campus, little ones are on the playground, they're playing in the courtyard and in their classrooms. We hear singing and music and giggles and laughter of children. The quiet and the stillness of our schools. There was another school that went still and quiet 8 years ago tomorrow. In Newtown, Connecticut, a 20-year-old man entered Sandy Hook Elementary School at 9:35 a.m. and within 5 minutes, 156 shots were fired. In 5 minutes, he shot 156 times, and 20 children and 6 educators lost their lives that day. The children were all between 6 and 7 years old. It took the shooter 5 minutes to extinguish 26 lives. This indescribable and horrific tragedy rocked our nation, broke our hearts to the core, and sparked a national conversation about gun safety laws and the importance of mental health intervention and resources. Within a month, 1 month, some of the parents of the children and friends from that school, broken with grief at an unimaginably hard time in their lives, came together and founded an organization called the Sandy Hook Promise. They turned their collective trauma into action. This organization has tirelessly worked for gun safety law reform, for better control and oversight, for better education, for mental health screening, and is working with schools and educators and administrators directly to empower them and children and our youth to recognize the warning signs to prevent further tragedies, and it has been effective. The stillness of homes without children gave rise to a movement. We come to this place to recognize that collective grief and trauma often becomes the fuel to foment change. We can witness this in this time and are reckoning with the genocide of the indigenous people of our country in the founding of this country. We can witness this in our dismantling of systems of oppression within ourselves, all of us, and our communities towards the highest good. We can witness this in centering Blackness, Black joy, and Black pride, in centering the voices of people of color, our kin, our beloved, our families, working for change and sparking more hope. Tragedy has turned to change, one spark against overwhelming odds. So often at this point in my sermon, I know I have a few raised eyebrows and a wondering as to where I'm going with all this, but the desecration of the temple, are you with me? The desecration in the temple and the shooting at Sandy Hook started both with violence, with evil intent, with destruction, and ended with a small jar of oil that endured, a small jar of grief, indescribable grief that turned into action. That small jar, we call that the spark of divinity, that spark of our highest intentions that lives within each one of us. In this stillness, and in this time of collective grief and cries for justice, my challenge to you, beloveds, my challenge for you this day is for you to find your small jar and give it your love, give it your tears, give it your forgiveness and your compassion and your inspiration. And I ask you, my people, how can we make this light endure and burn bright? We are the flame. We are the jar. It's not surprising that the symbol of our shared faith is the flaming chalice, which is the container and the flame. Together they burn bright to change our world. I'll close with this reading adapted from Rami Shapiro. We kindle this light. We kindle this light in honor of hope. May we never lose heart in our quest for justice. We kindle this light in honor of action. May we never mistake wishing for doing. We kindle this light in honor of nature. May our spirits never close to her wonders, nor our spirits deny their cries of pain. We kindle this light in honor of unity. May we celebrate our differences and yet have the courage to move beyond them. We kindle this light in honor of kindness. May we cultivate compassion in thought, word, and deed. Amen. Blessed be. And may it be so.